Hello there, and welcome. I'm so glad you've found your way here. You've arrived at the Endless Library, a place where you can stroll as slowly as you like, take in all the sights, and discover absolutely nothing urgent, nothing dangerous, nothing alarming, only shelves upon shelves of books, stretching on and on, until you forget how far you've walked. It is the perfect place to be when you want to rest your mind, let your thoughts wander, and maybe even drift off to sleep. Because here, in the Endless Library, not much happens. In fact, if something did happen, we'd probably write it down, stamp it 3 times, and file it away under mildly interesting. But don't worry, that hasn't happened in years. Before we step inside, I'll give you a small, gentle reminder. If you enjoy this kind of slow, cozy story, the kind that makes your eyelids heavy in the best way, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel Multi-Universe and join us for more boring adventures for sleep. You can also leave a comment afterward to let us know how far you made it before you nodded off. Some people make it 20 minutes, some people make it 2. Nobody's made it all the way through yet, but who knows, you might be the first. Now then, the doors are waiting. They're very tall doors, stretching almost to the ceiling. Made of wood, so old it seems to have forgotten which kind of tree it came from. Each door has a brass handle shaped like a curled-up snail. The handles are always cool to the touch, no matter the weather, as though they've been sitting patiently for centuries. When you push them, they don't groan or slam or squeal. No, the Endless Library would never allow such rude behavior. Instead, the doors creak politely, as if clearing their throats to say, "After you." So you step inside. At first glance, you might think you've entered an ordinary library. There are bookshelves lined up neatly in rows, tables with lamps glowing gently, a faint smell of ink and old paper mixed with something else, maybe hot chocolate, though there's no cup in sight. But then your eyes drift further and further and further, and you realize the rows of shelves do not end. You try to follow them with your gaze, but they go on and on, marching away into the distance, past the shadows, past the far wall. Except, wait, is there a far wall? It doesn't look like there is. The shelves just keep going, like soldiers in perfect formation, but made of wood and stacked with more books than you could ever count. If you started now and read 1 book every single day for the rest of your life, you wouldn't even finish 1 corner of this library. And that's if you skipped the especially long ones, like the 47-volume History of the Umbrella Stand. I've skimmed a few chapters. It's drier than toast left out in the sun, which is saying something. But that's all right. Nobody comes here to finish. Nobody comes here to rush. The Endless Library isn't about reaching the end. It's about enjoying the walk. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but wait, isn't endless a little intimidating? What if I get lost? Don't worry. Nobody gets lost in the Endless Library. That's because every aisle looks exactly like every other aisle. You turn left, you turn right, you go straight, and wherever you end up, it looks like where you began. In fact, some visitors have sworn that they walked in a circle, even though the shelves were perfectly straight. Others say the aisles move slightly when you're not looking, so you're always exactly where you need to be. I think that's just the library's way of saying, relax. You don't need to know where you are. Besides, you can always ask the librarian, Ms. Quill, if you truly want directions. Though, truth be told, she'd probably just point vaguely and say, that way, and return to stamping her books. She's very dedicated to her stamping, but we'll meet her properly a little later. For now, let's simply stand at the entrance and take in the view. Rows upon rows of shelves, each one so tall you need to tilt your head back to see the top. Wooden ladders lean here and there, though they never quite reach the last row. If you climb one, you'll always find the book you're reaching for is one shelf higher. It's the library's little joke. There are tables scattered about, with green shaded lamps glowing warmly. No one sits at them for long. The chairs are too comfortable. You sink in, meaning to flip through a book, and the next thing you know, you've nodded off and woken up 2 aisles over, with the lamp politely dimmed so you could rest. The air is cool but never cold, warm but never stuffy. The library seems to sense what you need and provides it quietly, without fuss. If you're chilly, you might find a folded blanket draped over the arm of your chair. If you're thirsty, a glass of water appears on the table beside you, with exactly 3 ice cubes inside. Always 3. Nobody knows why. And the silence? Oh, the silence here is not empty. It's full of small sounds, like tiny threads weaving together. The faint whisper of pages being turned somewhere in the distance. The soft brush of a feather quill scratching across paper. The quiet cough of a bookshelf clearing its throat. Bookshelves do that, you know, though only when they're sure no one is looking. The silence is so gentle, so steady, it makes your thoughts slow down. They begin to wander at the same pace as your footsteps, each idea strolling along, stopping now and then to glance at a title, tilting its head, shrugging, and moving on. It's the kind of silence you can walk inside, like slipping into a coat that fits just right. Now, some libraries have rules written on the wall. No eating, no shouting, no running. The endless library has only one rule, and it isn't even written down. It's just understood. Do not hurry, that's it. Don't rush, don't race. Don't try to reach the end, because you can't. The shelves are endless. After all, take your time, move slowly. Let the library set the pace. This rule is so important that the very floorboards seem to enforce it. Try to sprint, and you'll notice your legs moving slower than usual, as though you're wading through syrup. Try to speak too loudly, and your words will come out muffled, like you're underwater. But if you walk calmly, breathe steadily, and speak gently, everything feels easy. It's almost as if the library itself is whispering. Slow down. There's nothing to rush for here. And that's the truth. Nothing urgent waits for you. There are no deadlines in the endless library, no closing times, no impatient lines of people shuffling their feet. You can linger as long as you wish. You can stand in the same spot for hours, staring at the same book, and the library will not mind. In fact, the library rather likes it when you do that. It is vast, yes, impossibly vast. But it is also boring. Wonderfully, gloriously, restfully boring. And that, dear listener, is exactly what makes it perfect for sleep. So, if your eyelids are already a little heavy, that's all right. If your thoughts are already drifting like slow paper boats across a quiet pond, that's all right too. That's what the library is here for. And if you're still wide awake, curious about what else might be waiting down those endless aisles, well, don't worry. We'll take our time. There are many more shelves to stroll through. We won't get anywhere fast. That's a promise. But before we go wandering deeper into the aisles, let's pause here, just inside the door, and breathe in the quiet. The polite creak of the door behind us fades. The glow of the lamps hums softly. The rows of books wait patiently. This is the endless library. And our stroll has only just begun. Now that we've stepped inside, it's time to begin our stroll. No rushing, just one slow step at a time. The endless library is very patient, you see. It has all the time in the world, and so do we. We'll start with the very first aisle. It looks almost like an ordinary aisle in an ordinary library. almost. Except it seems to lean slightly to the left, as if it's tired from holding up so many shelves. The floorboards creak underfoot in a way that says, yes, yes, take your time, no need to hurry. The shelves here are tall, so tall that even if you stood on tiptoe, you'd barely reach the second shelf from the bottom. Books are packed from one end to the other, each spine lined up neatly, though not one looks particularly inviting. That's the beauty of this place. The books are not here to entertain you. They're here to simply exist. Let's take a look at some titles, shall we? The first book you notice is called The History of Slightly Bent Paperclips, Volume 1. It's a very thick book for such a specific subject. If you opened it, you'd find diagrams of paperclips bent at different angles. 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 127 degrees, each with an essay on whether the bend was intentional or accidental. Riveting stuff, if your idea of excitement is staring at stationery until your eyes water. Next to it sits The History of Slightly Bent Paperclips, Volume 2. This one covers the period from 1973 to 1975, which apparently saw a paperclip bending boom. Nobody knows why. A few books down is something even less helpful. The proper arrangement of socks by color, shade, and mood. The cover shows a drawer filled with socks arranged in perfect rainbow order, with a pair of very lonely beige socks sitting in the corner. One reviewer, if the library had reviews, might say, exhaustive and exhausting. Beside it is a much thinner book, How to Tell the Difference Between Beige and Slightly More Beige. A useful skill, perhaps, if you're painting walls or choosing socks. Otherwise, not so much. Everywhere you turn, the titles are oddly specific. A catalogue of clouds that look like potatoes. The Complete Guide to Unfinished Shopping Lists, Left-Handed Umbrellas, and the People Who Love Them. Volume 19 of the Encyclopedia of Very Small Things Misplaced in Couch Cushions. You start to see the pattern. None of these books are useful. None of them are thrilling. They are, however, endlessly boring. Perfect for drifting into that calm state where your mind begins to wander like a balloon caught on a slow breeze. And then there's the smell. Every book in the endless library carries the same scent. A little bit of dust, the kind that makes you think of attics and forgotten boxes. And, strangely, a little bit of hot chocolate. Not strong, not overpowering, just enough to make you pause and wonder if someone nearby has a steaming mug. But when you glance around, there's no mug in sight. There never is. It's as if the books themselves are trying to comfort you, saying, don't worry, you don't need cocoa in your hand to imagine it. We'll provide the memory for you. So you breathe in dust, ink, hot chocolate, a cozy, sleepy mix. Now, you may have noticed the ladders. They lean casually against the shelves, as if they've been napping there all day. Each one is tall, taller than you, taller than me, but never quite tall enough. If you climb to the very top, balancing carefully on the final rung, reaching as high as your arms will allow, the book you're after will always be just one shelf higher. It doesn't matter how tall you are. It doesn't matter how long your arms are. The top shelf is always just a little out of reach. It's the library's favorite trick. The ladders themselves squeak loudly when you climb them. Not in a complaining way, more in a cheerful, chatty way, as though each step is saying, eek, here we go, one more step, careful now, don't rush, eek. Some people enjoy the squeakiness. They say it sounds like the ladders are encouraging them, one rung at a time. Others find it slightly annoying. But, since no one here ever hurries, the squeaks are spaced out enough to be tolerable. There's even a story about someone who once tried to reach the very top shelf. They dragged over the tallest ladder, climbed it slowly, step by squeaky step, until they were as high as they could possibly go. They stretched one arm, then the other. They even stood on tiptoe, wobbling dangerously. And then, just as they almost touched the book, they sighed. They gave up. They climbed back down, muttering something about it not being worth the effort. Nobody remembers which book it was they were trying to reach. Some say it was a beginner's guide to sneezing quietly. Others claim it was the big book of missing puzzle pieces. Still, others insist it was just a plain dictionary. But really, it doesn't matter, because in the endless library, the chase is never the point. The shelves are endless. If you can't reach one book, you'll find 100 more waiting for you at eye level. Let's keep strolling down the aisle. Our footsteps sound soft against the floorboards. Every now and then, a tiny puff of dust floats into the air when a book shifts slightly on its shelf. But otherwise, nothing stirs. More titles come into view. An illustrated collection of door hinges that almost fit. Recipes that use exactly 7 raisins. The official catalogue of unmatched gloves, a step-by-step guide to yawning politely in public. Each spine looks as serious as any encyclopedia, as if these were the most important subjects in the world. Yet each one is as useless as the last. It's strange, isn't it? You'd think all these boring titles would be frustrating, but somehow they're not. Instead, they're calming. Because there's no pressure here to know, to learn, to keep up. You don't have to understand these books. You don't have to open them. Just reading the spines is enough. And if your eyes grow heavy while reading them, well, that's part of the library's plan. The aisle stretches on. You take your time. There's no reason to hurry. Each step feels slower than the last. Your thoughts are slowing too, like a lazy stream curling around stones. You run your finger lightly along the spine of the complete history of crumbs found in jacket pockets. Then you pause at an investigation into socks that disappear in the laundry. Finally, you smile faintly at volume 6 of the Encyclopedia of Unnecessary Apologies. You could spend hours here, reading titles, imagining what useless knowledge hides inside. But the library knows you don't need to. The books are content to sit quietly, to wait, to be ignored. And you're free to simply keep strolling. The air here is still. The smell of hot chocolate lingers faintly, mixing with the comforting must of dust and paper. Somewhere far away, you hear the faint squeak of another ladder as someone else climbs and gives up. But you don't need to worry about that. The sound fades quickly, blending back into the library's endless hush. You walk a little further, and the aisle doesn't end. It stretches on and on, like it always does. You could turn left or right, but it wouldn't matter. Every aisle is just like this one. Tall shelves, useless books, squeaky ladders, faint hot chocolate in the air. That sameness is what makes it so restful. No surprises, no drama, just row after row of quiet shelves. And so, we come to the end of our first stroll down an aisle. Not the end of the aisle itself, of course. That has no end. But the end of this part of our walk together. We've met the books, oddly specific, wonderfully unhelpful. We've smelled the faint hot chocolate in the dust. We've listened to the cheerful squeak of the ladders, and we've heard the story of the one person who tried to reach the top, only to give up halfway. And now, dear listener, you're free to pause here if your eyelids are already heavy. Or, if you'd like to keep walking with me, we'll wander further, deeper into the library, to see what other curiosities wait among the endless shelves. But whatever you choose, remember, there's no rush. There never is, in the endless library. If you've been wondering who runs this place, who tends to these endless shelves and keeps everything in line, well, the answer is simple. The endless library has exactly one librarian. Just one. That's all it needs. Her name is Ms. Quill. Now, you might expect a librarian in a library this size to be constantly rushing around, shushing people, shelving books, writing overdue notices, and balancing a teetering stack of returns. But Ms. Quill does none of that. In fact, you'll rarely catch her hurrying at all, because Ms. Quill has one rule above all others. Rule number 1 in her notebook, and she does have a notebook, we'll get to that in a moment, is simply this: don't hurry. That's it. Just 2 words. Don't hurry. It's written right at the top of the first page, underlined twice. And if you were to ask her why that rule is so important, she would tilt her head thoughtfully, tap the end of her pen against her chin, and say, very softly, because books don't like to be rushed, and neither do readers, and neither do librarians. And with that, she would give you the kind of small, polite smile that says the conversation is over, though she wouldn't mind if you stayed and chatted a bit longer anyway. Ms. Quill dresses the way you'd expect a librarian in an endless library to dress, sensibly, comfortably, in colors that are not quite memorable, not grey exactly, but not quite beige either, something in between, like the color of a cloud that isn't sure if it wants to rain or just drift lazily through the sky. Her shoes are always quiet, no matter how squeaky the floorboards are. If you or I walked across the room, the planks would groan and sigh. But when Ms. Quill walks, the wood seems to hold its breath. It respects her, I think. And she always carries her stamper. This stamper is her most important tool. In fact, you could argue it's the only tool she ever needs. A heavy little block of wood with a handle, and on the bottom, a rubber stamp that simply says, stamped. She stamps everything. Every book that passes through her hands receives a stamp. Borrowed books, returned books, books left sitting open on a table, books someone picks up and then puts back without reading a word, yes, stamped. Even books she glances at herself, she stamps them too, just to be fair. If you brought her a piece of paper, she'd stamp that as well. She once stamped a shopping list for a visitor, and the visitor was so pleased, they framed it. Nobody knows why she does this. Perhaps she likes the sound, the soft thump of rubber pressing against paper, the little echo that follows. Or perhaps she simply likes the certainty of it. A stamped book is a book accounted for. A book that has, in some small way, been noticed. And in a library this big, being noticed, even briefly, is an honor. Now, about that notebook. Ms. Quill keeps it tucked under her arm at all times. The cover is plain brown, the kind of brown that looks like it's been brown forever. Inside, the pages are ruled neatly, each one filled with her careful, looping handwriting. It is, in fact, the official rulebook of the Endless Library. Though I should warn you, hardly anyone has ever read it. Not because Ms. Quill won't let them, she's happy to share, but because the rules, once you peek inside, are terribly dull. Rule 1, as I mentioned, don't hurry. Rule 2, always put books back on the shelf they came from. If you can't remember which shelf, put them on the nearest one, and the shelves will sort it out later. Rule 3, whispering is allowed. Normal talking is allowed. Loud talking is technically allowed too, but nobody ever does it. The library seems to frown when voices get too bold. Rule 4. If a book falls off a shelf by itself, please log the event with Ms. Quill. She will stamp the log. Rule 5. Tea is allowed in the reading corner, but not coffee, because coffee tends to make people hurry. And hurrying is strictly against Rule 1. And so it goes. Rule after rule, each one obvious, unnecessary, or both. The kind of rules that exist mainly to make the rule book feel full. When you finally meet Ms. Quill, you'll find her at her desk. Not a grand desk, Not a carved oak monument to authority. Just a modest wooden desk that looks as though it's been borrowed from a school classroom and never returned. A small lamp glows faintly on one corner, and the stamper sits in the middle, waiting patiently. She greets you politely with a nod and a quiet "good evening" or "good morning," or whichever it is for you. Her voice is soft, so soft, in fact, that you may find yourself leaning in a little, though somehow you always hear her perfectly. It's a voice made for bedtime stories, for whispering secrets across a pillow, for telling you that everything is fine and you can rest now. And when you ask her how she manages to take care of a library this endless, she will fold her hands on the desk, glance around at the shelves, and reply, one stamp at a time. Now, if you linger a little, she might tell you more. She might share a bit about the books she has stamped today. Perhaps one was titled The Definitive Guide to Bread Crusts Left Uneaten. She stamped it twice because it seemed particularly forgotten. Or perhaps she mentioned the visitor who checked out volume 12 of the Index of Slightly Wobbly Tables. They promised to return it next Thursday, but Ms. Quill didn't write down which Thursday. She isn't worried. The books always find their way back eventually. And as she talks, she'll remind you, ever so gently, the library is not a place for rushing, not a place for quests or adventures or urgent discoveries. No, it's best explored very, very slowly, a shelf at a time, a page at a time, or even just a title at a time. That way, nothing much happens, and that's exactly how we like it. There's a relief in her words, isn't there? A kind of freedom. You don't have to do anything here. You don't have to solve anything, finish anything, conquer or defeat anything. You're not on a quest. You're on a meander. And meanders, unlike quests, have no end goal. They go on as long as they like, and when you stop, that's the end. Simple as that. So you chat a little more with Miss Quill. Perhaps you ask her what her favorite rule in the rulebook is. She considers this seriously, tapping her pen on the desk, before finally saying, Rule 27. If you find a bookmark in a book, you may keep it, or you may leave it. Either is fine. She stamps the notebook to mark the end of that thought. Thump. Perhaps you ask her how she spends her evenings when the library grows dark. She tells you she enjoys walking slowly between the shelves, listening to the sound of pages turning themselves. Some books, you see, like to read aloud at night, though only to themselves. She stamps a passing book. Thump. Perhaps you ask if she ever gets lonely, being the only librarian in an endless place. She smiles again, the polite kind of smile, and says, not at all. The shelves keep me company. The ladders squeak their songs. The books breathe softly in their sleep. It's never truly quiet here. And besides, visitors like you drift in now and then. That's enough. She stamps her rulebook, though you're not sure why. Thump, and before long, you realize she's right. This isn't a story about daring discoveries or dramatic plot twists. This isn't a quest to reach the end of the library. There is no end. This is simply a meander, a slow walk through an endless place where nothing much happens except the small things. The squeak of a ladder, the thump of a stamp, the faint smell of dust and hot chocolate that never quite fades. It's enough. You thank Ms. Quill for her time, and she nods politely, already reaching for the next book that needs stamping. You take a step back, listening once more to that familiar sound, thump, as the ink presses into another forgotten page. And as you turn away, you feel calmer than before. You're not here to chase answers. You're not here to finish a story. You're here to wander, and maybe, just maybe, drift a little closer to sleep. Because that's the secret of the endless library and of Ms. Quill herself. Nothing much happens here. And that is exactly what makes it perfect. Now that we've met Ms. Quill, and we've admired her stamping skills, and we've agreed, at least silently, that we're not in a hurry, it seems only right to wander a little farther into the shelves. And this is where the library begins to show its peculiarities, because you might expect, in a library this vast, to find familiar sections: history, poetry, science, fiction, maybe even a shelf or two of those mystery novels where the detective always solves the case just in time for tea. But the endless library does not organize itself in the usual way. It organizes itself according to its own peculiar logic. And so, as we turn a quiet corner, we stumble into our first odd section, the completely blank books section, an entire aisle devoted to books that contain absolutely nothing. Every shelf, from top to bottom, is lined with hardcovers and paperbacks, whose pages are as white and silent as a fresh snowfall. The titles on the spines are there, of course. The covers are colorful, sometimes even dramatic. One book is called The Epic of All Things. Another, a complete and unabridged history of everything you could possibly imagine. There's even a small paperback called The Most Exciting Story Ever Told. And yet, when you open them, nothing. Just clean, empty pages. Now, one might think this is some kind of trick. Perhaps invisible ink. Perhaps the words only appear under moonlight. But no. Ms. Quill assures us that the blank books are simply blank, and that's all there is to it. Some people like them, she told me once, stamping one just for good measure. Thump. They say it's restful, flipping through a story that doesn't go anywhere, and she's right, you know. There's something oddly soothing about a blank page. No demands, no plot to follow, no characters to keep track of. Just quiet whiteness, waiting for nothing in particular. Some visitors even bring their own pens and try to write in them. But the books don't seem to like that. The next time you open them, the ink is gone, as though the book has politely declined your contribution. So the shelves remain full of silence. And, fittingly, nobody lingers here too long, though not because they're bored. More because the blankness has a way of making you sleepy. And that, of course, is very much the point. A few aisles over, we find another strange theme. The cookbooks without recipes section. These shelves are devoted entirely to cookbooks. Heavy tomes with gilt lettering. Slim paperbacks with cheerful cartoon chefs on the cover. Spiral-bound community cookbooks that look as though they've been donated by a very enthusiastic village committee. But when you open them, you'll notice something odd. There are no recipes, not a single list of ingredients, not a single set of instructions. Instead, each page is filled with descriptions, not of how to cook something, but of what it might feel like to imagine it. One book describes, in loving detail, the texture of a soup you will never be able to make. Smooth, velvety, with the faintest suggestion of time that drifts away just as you notice it. Another book devotes 3 entire chapters to the smell of bread you cannot bake. A crust so golden it almost shines, and an inside so soft it sighs when you press it. And yet another contains an essay on the idea of pie. Not pie itself, but the concept of pie. A circle of comfort, a wedge of warmth, a triangle of anticipation. You turn page after page, and your stomach may begin to growl, but you'll never find a shopping list or an oven temperature. The books don't tell you how to cook, only how to daydream about cooking. Once, a visitor asked Miss Quill if this was an oversight. She shook her head firmly. The cookbooks without recipes are very intentional, she said, stamping one that claimed to contain the ultimate lasagna. Thump. They remind us that not everything delicious has to be eaten. Sometimes it's enough just to imagine. And really, she has a point. After all, food in dreams never spoils. Now, we move on. Past the blank books, past the cookbooks, and into one of my favorite sections of all. The maps of places that don't exist section. At first glance, it looks ordinary enough. Rolled up scrolls in pigeonhole cubbies. Atlases stacked neatly. Folders of charts and diagrams. But when you unfurl a map, you realize something strange. This town doesn't exist. This mountain range doesn't exist. This river flows nowhere. One map shows an entire continent shaped like a teapot. Another reveals an archipelago of tiny islands, each labeled only as somewhere, maybe. A particularly elaborate chart maps out the kingdom of people who always forget their umbrellas. The capital city, Sockshire, is marked with a cheerful umbrella icon, though, of course, nobody there owns one. And tucked between two atlases, I once found a folded parchment showing the endless library itself. At least, it looked like the library. All the shelves, all the aisles, neatly drawn in ink. But the map only showed the left-hand side. The right-hand side was missing entirely. Just a blank space where the shelves should have been. Nobody knows where the right-hand side went. Did the cartographer run out of paper? Did the shelves wander off when nobody was looking? Or does the endless library prefer to keep part of itself a secret? Ms. Quill, when asked, simply stamped the map. Thump. The shelves will reveal themselves when they're ready, she said, which of course explains absolutely nothing, but sounds wise enough that we all nodded politely. Wandering further, the odd sections continue on and on. Of course, there's a shelf labeled books you meant to read but never did. Another marked manuals for machines that have not been invented yet. And an entire alcove full of bookshelves that contain nothing but indexes. Lists of words pointing to pages that don't exist in books that were never written. Each aisle has its own quiet joke. Each stack whispers its own peculiar nonsense. And yet, it's never overwhelming. The strangeness here is gentle, harmless, whimsical in a way that makes you smile faintly and think, well, that's odd, before moving on. Because the library is endless, and there's always another aisle, and another, and another. But there's no rush. You don't need to see them all tonight. You don't need to see them all ever. You only need to walk slowly, breathe gently, and let the absurdity wash over you like the faint smell of dust and hot chocolate that never quite leaves the air. And so, with the odd sections behind us, for now, we wander onward, deeper into the library, not looking for anything in particular, not hoping to finish, just enjoying the meander, because that is the real secret of the endless library. You don't explore it to discover something new. You explore it to fall asleep to the sound of pages turning, ladders squeaking, and stamps thumping softly in the distance. Up until now, the endless library has behaved exactly as one might expect. Silent, peaceful, predictable. Books stay on their shelves. Ladders stay where they've been wheeled. The air stays pleasantly still, flavored faintly with that curious mixture of dust and hot chocolate. Nothing happens here, and that's precisely what makes it such a restful place to visit. But every now and then, just once in a long while, something does happen. And as we stand here, not really looking for anything in particular, one such thing occurs. It begins with a sound so small that, at first, you might think you imagined it. Thump. A single book slips from its place on the shelf, slides down the spine of the one beside it, and lands on the carpet with the gentlest of thumps. Now, in other places, this might not be remarkable. Books fall off shelves all the time, usually when someone's reaching carelessly or tugging one too quickly. But here, in the endless library, this is the sort of event that can define a whole week. The book lands perfectly flat, as if it meant to do so. No damage to the cover, no bent pages, it simply rests there on the soft carpet, quietly, almost smugly, as though pleased with itself for making such an entrance. And for a long, breathless moment, that is all. The book lies there. The shelves loom above it. The air holds its breath. Then, of course, there is Miss Quill. She appears as though summoned by the sound. Nobody saw her leave her desk. Nobody saw her cross the aisles. And yet, there she is, standing beside the fallen book, pen and notebook already in hand. Without a word, she kneels down, adjusts her spectacles, and inspects the scene with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for rare celestial events. The book is carefully noted in her fallen book's log. The log, bound in sturdy brown leather, looks far too heavy for its contents. For in the past 10 years, there have been only 3 entries. Entry number 1, a dictionary of unpronounceable words, slipped from shelf 42C. Tuesday morning, approximately 11:17. Entry number 2, a small guide to very large rocks, toppled gently from shelf 9 a Friday evening. Approximately 6:03. Entry number 3, collected yawns. Volume 2, eased itself down from shelf to 7B. Wednesday afternoon, approximately 2:45. And now, at long last, entry number 4, Ms. Quill writes it out with care. The date, the time, the shelf number, the title of the book. She even makes a little sketch of the way it landed, flat as a pancake, on its cover. When she is finished, she stamps the page. Thump, and that, officially, is that. Of course, word spreads. Not loudly. There are no gasps or shrieks here. No rushing or commotion. This is, after all, a library. But if you pass a visitor in the aisle, you might hear a whisper. Did you hear? A book fell. Really? Which one? I think it was a mildly interesting catalogue of windowsills. Ah, fascinating. And then the conversation drifts off, as all conversations here do, into quiet contemplation. Still, you can feel it in the air. A faint shimmer of excitement. The kind of quiet thrill that, in another place, might accompany fireworks or a parade. Here, it is enough to murmur, exciting day, isn't it? Before going back to one's chair, one's endless blank book, or one's daydream about soup. And that's all there is to it. No mystery unravels. No dramatic chase ensues. The book did not contain a hidden map, or a prophecy, or even a mildly interesting doodle. It was just a book, sitting too close to the edge. Perhaps leaning against its neighbor a little too heavily, until gravity politely suggested it come down for a rest. Once Miss Quill has logged it, she lifts it carefully with both hands, as though it were a rare treasure, and slides it back onto the shelf. The shelves, for their part, seem relieved. They settle quietly, as if to say, there now, everything is back where it belongs. And after that, there is nothing more to see. In another kind of story, this moment would be the beginning of something grand. The fallen book might contain a clue to a secret passage. The librarian's log might hold hidden codes. The visitor's whispers might grow into a plot, a scheme, an adventure. But not here. Here the book simply fell. And that was the beginning, the middle, and the end of the event. And isn't that, in its own way, perfect? Because anticlimax is the specialty of the endless library. Things happen, yes, but only just barely. They begin and end almost in the same breath, leaving behind not drama, but the faint amusement of something so small it could almost have been nothing at all. And so the listeners, you, dear wanderer, are left with the tiniest smile. Perhaps even a chuckle at how much fuss we've made over one single book falling onto a soft carpet. A book that, had it stayed on its shelf, might never have been noticed at all. Now the log is closed. The book is reshelved. The whispers have faded, and the library has returned to its natural state. A place where nothing much happens, and even when it does, it doesn't matter. The air is calm again. The silence has resumed its steady hum. The hot chocolate dust smell has settled back into the aisles, and if you listen closely, you might think you hear the shelves themselves sigh in relief, as though they, too, prefer it when nothing happens at all. We could stand here, if you like, gazing at the very spot where the book once lay. It's just a bit of carpet, really. A rectangle of soft, faded fabric, no different from any other patch of floor in the endless library. But because of what happened here, the brief, thrilling thump of a book meeting gravity, it seems almost special. Almost, and yet, as you look longer, it seems less so. The longer you stare, the more ordinary it appears, until you begin to wonder if it even happened at all. Was there ever really a fallen book? Or was it just a passing thought, a little daydream, like all the others drifting through this place? Either way, it doesn't matter, because the story has already slipped back into stillness, the way a pebble sinks into a pond and the ripples smooth themselves away. And this is the moment, dear listener, where you might realize this isn't a quest, this isn't an adventure, this is a meander, a stroll through quiet spaces where even the biggest event is small enough to lull you into a smile, then into a yawn, and then, if we've done our job properly, into sleep. So let your eyes grow heavy if they wish. Let your mind wander as slowly as Miss Quill's pen across her logbook. Let the anticlimax wash over you like warm tea, until the idea of something happening feels almost too much effort, because here, in the endless library, nothing more is expected of you. Not now, not ever. So, where were we? Ah yes, wandering. The book has been reshelved. The whispers have died down, and the air has folded itself neatly back into silence. There is nothing pressing to do, no particular aisle to visit, and certainly no urgency about reaching the end. Which is fortunate, because the end is not something one reaches here. Step by step, we stroll further into the endless library. Our shoes make the faintest sound on the carpet, more like a suggestion of footsteps than actual noise. The shelves rise on either side like wooden canyons, lined with spines of every size and color. Some gleam as though polished yesterday. Others lean at angles, dusty and forgotten, their titles nearly rubbed away. And all of them, without exception, stretch into the distance with no hint of stopping. We walk deeper and deeper still. The shelves keep unfolding ahead, patient and unhurried, like an accordion that never runs out of folds. If you were hoping to reach a wall, a window, or even a corner, you might be waiting a long while. The endless library does not encourage conclusions, it prefers continuations. And so, deeper we go. What we hear as we wander is not silence, not exactly. It is something quieter, something more companionable. A page turns somewhere in the distance, soft as a sigh. A quill scratches slowly across parchment. Scratch, pause, scratch. Somewhere else, there's the faint creak of a chair adjusting as someone leans back, perhaps to rest their eyes. And underneath it all, there is a kind of hum. Not mechanical, not electronic, not even musical. Just the hum of a place so filled with stillness that the stillness itself seems to make a sound. It is a silence that has been polished smooth by centuries of use. You can almost imagine the shelves themselves humming along, pleased with their endless work of simply existing. The longer we walk, the more the books themselves begin to resemble other things. For instance, pillows, not literal ones. Of course, don't try sleeping on a hardcover atlas unless you want a neck complaint. But in their abundance, In their soft, weighty presence, there's something pillow-like about them. 1,000 cushions stacked neatly into rows. Cushions for the mind, cushions for the imagination. Some titles even sound pillowish. The gentle weight of quiet afternoons. A thorough catalogue of feathers, most of which look the same. The art of restful repetition. You could almost pluck one from the shelf, tuck it under your head, and drift off for a nap right here in the aisle. And who's to say the library would mind? Which leads to another thought. If books can seem like pillows, can shelves seem sleepy too? Look at them. Towering, steady, yet slightly tilted in places, as though nodding off mid-watch. The carvings along their edges look suspiciously like closed eyes. Their long wooden frames stretch so high they disappear into shadow, almost like a giant dozing, with their chin resting on their chest. Perhaps the shelves themselves are just very large sleepers, holding books the way we hold dreams. And maybe, just maybe, if you listened closely enough, you'd hear them snore. Not a loud snore, nothing disruptive. Just the faint, whistling breath of a colossal nap. The thought is so comforting, so absurd, that we linger on it a moment longer, until it seems perfectly natural that an entire library could be a little drowsy at all times. Ah, look ahead, do you see it? Nestled in a pool of lamplight, there stands a chair. Not just any chair. The chair. Every library has one. The chair that looks unreasonably inviting. Its cushions plump, but not too plump. Its arms worn, but not too worn. This chair seems to promise that if you sit in it, you will never want to rise again. Someone once called it a trap. But a nice trap. The kind of trap that lures you in with comfort, then keeps you with the simple argument. Why bother leaving when everything you need is right here? This chair, I should note, is always occupied. Not by a person, necessarily. You might look and see it empty. But the moment you consider sitting down, you'll realize it already belongs to someone. Someone who has been sitting there for hours, or perhaps years. Not that it matters. The chair is eternal, and so is the sense that whoever claims it will not be leaving any time soon. They say you could sit down for just a moment in that chair and wake up 3 chapters later. 3 chapters of what? Nobody specifies. Perhaps the book in your lap. Perhaps the book in someone else's lap 2 aisles over. Perhaps the library itself, which seems to be writing chapters in silence every second of the day. One visitor claimed they sat there for the length of a single page, only to look up and discover the librarian had aged 5 years. Ms. Quill denies this, of course, but she didn't look entirely certain about it herself. Another visitor insists they sat, stood up, and nothing had passed at all. Not a second, not a blink. But the way they rubbed their eyes suggested otherwise. Whatever the case, the chair holds time differently. It stretches it, kneads it, and folds it over itself like bread dough until you can't tell whether you've rested for a minute or a millennium. And frankly, isn't that what a good chair should do? We don't sit, though it's tempting. We nod politely at the chair as one nods to a respectable elder, and we continue our slow wandering. Deeper, still deeper. The aisles continue to unfold ahead, as endless as ever. Nothing urgent waits for us. No task hurries us along, and so we allow ourselves to move as slowly as the silence, stretching time as we go. The pages turn, the quills scratch, the hum continues, and we walk, and walk, and walk, further into the endless quiet. It is difficult to say exactly when evening begins in the endless library. There are no windows to watch the sky, no clocks that chime, no sunbeams that slant through dusty panes. And yet, somehow, everyone seems to know. Perhaps it's the way the silence shifts, deepening from a gentle hush to something fuller, like a blanket being laid carefully over the aisles. Perhaps it's the way the pages turn more slowly, quills lift more often for rests, footsteps grow rarer, or perhaps it is the lamps. Because suddenly, as though by shared instinct, lamps begin to glow. Along the walls, on little tables tucked between shelves, and dangling from hooks high above, the library's lamps come alive. Not all at once, no, that would be far too abrupt for a place like this. They bloom one by one, like drowsy fireflies, choosing the exact right moment to wake. First, a golden circle of light spreads at the end of one aisle. Then another lamp flares softly to life, to shelves down. Another and another, until the darkness is not banished but gentled, pushed back just enough to make the rows feel like safe tunnels of glow. The flames inside these lamps are never in a hurry. They don't flicker wildly. They burn with the patience of an old friend, steady and warm. Each lamp gives off not just light, but the faintest scent of beeswax and something like toasted bread. A smell that says, it's time to rest now, but comfortably. You might wonder, shutters on what? The library has no windows, and yet, every evening, shutters are closed. Not by hands you can see, not with creaks or bangs, simply closed. Panels of dark wood slide across frames that weren't there a moment ago, tucking away invisible windows we never noticed. Why? No one asks. It is simply routine. The endless library has its ways. The closing of shutters doesn't block out light, for there was none. Instead, it seems to signal, the day's chapter is done. Let's not peek outside the margins anymore. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the click of locks being turned by unseen caretakers. Not an alarming lock, mind you, more like the gentle latch of a door in a friendly house, keeping the warmth inside where it belongs. With the shutters sealed and the lamps glowing, the quiet routines of the library begin to slow. A reader folds a page corner and rests their cheek against their fist. A quill dips once more into its inkpot, scrawls a final word, and then is laid carefully to rest. Footsteps, so soft, so few, fade away as their owners drift toward whatever corner of the stacks they call their nest. Even Miss Quill, the ever-diligent librarian, sets her great stamp aside. She does not stop working, oh no, but she shifts to evening tasks, rearranging a single bookmark here, straightening a chair there, tapping closed the cover of a book that had leaned open too long. She moves with the same patience as always, but gentler now, as though the whole library were preparing for bed. The sound of stamping grows fainter, replaced by the soft shuffle of papers being tucked away. Everything slows in the endless library at evening. But, unlike the world outside, which often rushes to squeeze in a last flurry of activity, here the slowness is celebrated. It's as if time itself yawns, stretches, and curls up comfortably on a rug. Shelves seem taller, shadows longer, but not in any frightening way. The air feels thick with drowsiness, like warm milk poured into a cup. Even the dust motes, drifting lazily in the lamplight, appear slower, circling at half their usual pace. You may catch yourself breathing more deeply, matching the rhythm of the place. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. No need to do anything more. And yes, by now you realize the library is a town unto itself. There are no bakeries or blacksmiths here, no markets or fountains. Instead, there are aisles like streets, shelves like buildings, lamps like little windows glowing golden. And like any town, it has its bedtime habits. The chair, that ever-comfortable trap, seems to sink deeper into itself, cushions sighing as if content. A stack of books slumps together like neighbors leaning shoulder to shoulder. The fallen book's log lies open on Miss Quill's desk, the ink drying peacefully in its latest entry. Somewhere, faintly, a clock might tick. But if it does, it ticks very slowly, like someone tapping once every dream or two. As the lamps burn steadily, you may hear whispers. Not urgent whispers, not secrets, just gentle murmurs of the library tucking itself in. A spine groans softly as it settles against its neighbors. A ladder creaks as though it has shifted to a more comfortable angle. A faint rustle suggests one of the blank books has turned a page on its own, even though it has nothing to say. None of it demands attention. All of it says, rest, rest, rest. Eventually, every routine finishes. Books are closed, quills set down, lamps trimmed. The air grows heavier, thicker, quieter still. Even Ms. Quill retreats into shadow, her footsteps padding softly away, leaving the aisles in peace. And what remains? Only us. Strolling slower than before, watching as the day's tiny motions give way to night's greater stillness. And so, the evening settles in fully. Not in a rush, not all at once, but gradually, completely. The endless library is now a place of golden glow, heavy hush, and routines wrapped neatly away. Every corner seems to sigh. Every shelf seems to lean closer together. Even the air itself seems to rest its head upon the stacks. There is no urgency, no to-do list, no next step. There is only the gentle winding down of a world that has spent all day not hurrying, and is now preparing to not hurry even harder through the night. The library rests, and so may you. At last, after so many slow steps through endless aisles, we find it, a cozy corner, not a dramatic discovery, no trumpet fanfare, no flashing sign, just a quiet space at the bend of two shelves. Almost as though it has been waiting all along. There's a cushioned chair there, deep and wide enough to hold anyone who dares to sink into it. The cushion is the sort of soft that doesn't argue with you. It simply accepts you with a muffled sigh that might well be relief. Beside the chair stands a little table, and on the table a small lamp. The lamp glows the way a candle might if it had been trained by the library itself. Steady, warm, without hurry. The light falls not in harsh circles, but in a gentle spill, like honey poured carefully from a spoon. This corner is not the grandest place in the library. It is not even remarkable. And yet, in this moment, it feels like the exact right place to be. Stacked gently nearby are books. Not towers of them, not mountains, just a few, leaned against one another like sleepy friends. What's remarkable is what they are not. They are not shouting to be read. They are not bristling with urgency. They simply exist, comfortably unread, as though their greatest purpose tonight is to provide company by their very presence. Their covers shine dully in the lamp's glow. Their spines lean against one another, whispering in the secret language of bindings and glue. Their pages rest, not fluttering, not fussing, simply resting. You could pick one up, you could, if you liked, open it. But you don't need to. Not tonight, not here. Because, in the endless library, books are not impatient. They will wait. They always wait. And so they sit there beside you, guardians of the quiet, unbothered companions of rest. Somewhere close, perhaps just behind the next row, or the next after that, the sound of turning pages drifts softly. It is not quick, it is not constant. It is the sound of a fountain in the distance, not rushing water, but steady drops. A page turned. A pause. Another page turned. Another pause, turn, pause, turn. Pause. The rhythm is unhurried, the gentlest of lullabies. The pauses are not empty either. They are filled with stillness. The kind of stillness that cushions the world and makes it easier to breathe. It is a sound you could listen to forever without growing tired. Indeed, perhaps you already are. Here in the cozy corner, in the warm glow of the lamp, surrounded by resting books and the fountain quiet rhythm of distant pages, I'll extend an invitation to you. You don't need to keep your eyes open anymore. Not if they're heavy. Not if they'd rather close. Just as the books around us are content to rest unopened, your thoughts too may rest. You don't need to read them all, not tonight. Let them lean against one another, stack themselves quietly, and wait for another day. This library has no end. You will never miss a thing by closing your eyes now. The shelves will still be here. The lamps will still glow. The librarian will still stamp patiently, and you are allowed to rest. So, if you'd like, close your eyes. Let them fall gently, like shutters, sliding over unseen windows. Let your breath deepen. Inhale, exhale. Let the library's hush become your hush. The endless library keeps many secrets, many shelves, many aisles. But its greatest promise is this. You do not have to reach the end, because there is no end. That is what makes it restful. No pressure to finish, no need to hurry, no fear of missing out. The library is here, and will always be here, infinite and unending, patient and calm. You may wander its halls tomorrow, or the day after, or not at all. Because tonight, the only task before you is to rest. And the library will watch over you while you do. And as your breath steadies, as your body grows heavier in the cushioned chair, you might hear it. A whisper, not from me, not from any person, but from the shelves themselves. The spines press closer, the books sigh softly, and together they murmur. Good night, another row joins in. Good night, the ladders creak ever so faintly. Their own farewell. Good night, even the lamps hum softly, beeswax and flame offering their glow. Good night, a chorus of shelves, endless and kind, repeating again and again. Good night, good night, good night, and in the very last moment before sleep finds you, perhaps one voice among the shelves leans close enough for you alone to hear. We hope to see you again soon. And then, nothing but the hush of the library. The aisles stretch on, but you do not need to walk them. The books whisper still, but you do not need to listen. The lamps glow steady, but you do not need to watch. Because now, at last, it is your time to sleep. Good night.